Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. For the longest time, I truly believed that my suffering came from what other people did to me. From the heartbreaks, the betrayals, the mischances. I could point to the exact moments, the specific people, the timelines of pain like a map etched across my life. And for a while, that belief gave me comfort because if they were to blame, maybe someday they'd fix it or apologize, or maybe life itself would somehow make it right. But here's the hard truth that hit me one night when I was lying awake, exhausted but unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling and feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. The suffering wasn't in the past anymore. It was here now. It was in me. What if the pain didn't live in the event, but in my refusal to accept it? What if it was my resistance, my need to have things be different, that kept hurting me? It was like the floor dropped out from under me. I started to see how I kept replaying things, not because they mattered anymore, but because something inside me couldn't let go of how they should have been. That word haunted me. Should. They should have stayed. It shouldn't have ended. I should have known better. And every should pulled me further away from peace. I remembered reading this quote by Jung. What you resist persists. I'd always thought it was a nice little line, but in that moment, it cracked something open inside me. I realized I'd been spending years of my life arguing with reality, like really fighting it. I wasn't just sad when something bad happened. I was enraged that it did happen. I was clinging to an alternate version of life where everything went the way I wanted. And let me tell you, that version doesn't exist. It never did. We're taught to believe we can control life if we just try hard enough, love hard enough, plan well enough. But life has its own rhythm, and it doesn't ask for our permission. It just is. And when things go off script, and they always do, our first instinct is to fight. That fight becomes our suffering. I started to notice the pattern. Something would go wrong. A friend would disappoint me. A goal would slip out of reach, and I would spiral. Not because I couldn't handle the moment, but because I refused to let go of the story in my head. The story where I'm in control, where pain has no place, where life owes me happiness. That resistance was like pouring gasoline on a fire. It didn't matter how small the spark. I'd burn myself out trying to change something that already happened. And I saw it in others too. Friends who couldn't move on from breakups years in the past. People who carried grudges like armor. Folks who acted like life betrayed them. Not because something bad happened, but because they believed it shouldn't have. But who says it shouldn't have? That question haunted me, because I realized that pain is part of the deal. Loss, disappointment, grief, they're built into the fabric of existence. There's no version of life where we're untouched by it. And yet, we act like pain is an error, a glitch. We fight it instead of making space for it. There was this moment I'll never forget. I was walking home on a rainy evening, soaked and angry about something trivial. I don't even remember what it was now, but I suddenly just stopped, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "Okay, I surrender, not in defeat, not in hopelessness, but in something that felt strangely like strength. Like, maybe I don't have to fight everything. Maybe I can just be here in the rain, in the mess, in the moment, and still be okay." And that was the beginning. Not of happiness, not yet, but of relief. The kind of relief you feel when you stop trying to swim upstream and just float for a second. I wasn't healed. I was still aching, but I wasn't at war anymore. And I think that's the first real step. Not fixing it, not getting over it, just putting down the sword, stopping the inner commentary that says, this should be different. Because once you do, you create the space to actually feel, to breathe, to begin. It's wild how much of our suffering isn't about the pain itself, but about our resistance to the pain. The expectations, the control, the need for certainty, they wrap around us like chains. And when we finally realize we're holding the key the whole time, something shifts. So if you're there right now, fighting, gripping, replaying, just know I've been there too. And I'm not telling you to let go because it's easy. I'm saying it because it's the only way I found any peace. And maybe, just maybe, it's the doorway to something deeper than peace. Something like freedom. There was something almost terrifying about realizing that my pain wasn't being caused by the world around me, but by the way I responded to it. It meant I couldn't blame anyone anymore. I couldn't point fingers, couldn't say, if only they hadn't done this, or if only life had gone that way. Because deep down I knew the real battle was never out there, it was always inside me. And the more I saw it, the more I realized I had been feeding the very thing I wanted to escape. Every time I replayed the hurt in my mind, every time I tried to rewrite the story in my head to get a different outcome, every time I resisted the truth of what had already happened, it was like I was trying to put out a fire by throwing paper into it. But here's what really started to change everything: the idea of radical acceptance. I remember the first time I heard that phrase. It felt cold, like giving up, like letting life walk all over me. But that's not what it means at all. It doesn't mean liking what happened. It doesn't mean saying it was okay. It means stopping the fight with reality and starting a conversation with yourself. You know that feeling when you're trying to hold back tears and it just builds and builds until your chest aches? But then, finally, you let them fall, and there's this strange, quiet release. That's what acceptance feels like. Not joyful, not triumphant, just real, just honest. And sometimes honesty is the most healing thing we can offer ourselves. I remember a very specific night. I was sitting alone, lights off, just me and my thoughts. I had lost something I thought I couldn't live without. And my mind kept circling back to the past, like if I just looked at it from enough angles, it would somehow hurt less. But it never did. So I tried something different. I said it out loud. It happened. I didn't want it to happen. I still don't like that it happened. But it did. And it was like something inside me exhaled for the first time in months. See, we think that acceptance will make the pain worse, but it actually stops us from multiplying it. Because pain is inevitable. But suffering? Suffering is the resistance. It's what we layer on top. It's the stories, the what-ifs, the could-have-beens. When you strip that away, you're left with something raw, yes, but something real. And real is where healing begins. It's like, imagine you're carrying this huge, heavy backpack. You're exhausted, but you keep walking because you think this is just how it is. Life is hard. I have to carry this. But then someone stops you and says, you know you can put that down, right? And at first, you don't believe them. You think it's a trick, but eventually you try. And when you do, you realize how much energy you've been wasting just holding on. Radical acceptance is that moment of putting the backpack down. I'm not saying it's easy. Sometimes it's the hardest thing you'll ever do because it means letting go of the hope that the past can be different. And weirdly, sometimes we hold on to that hope like it's a lifeline, but it's not. It's an anchor. And when we let it go, when we finally say, this happened, I don't need to rewrite it anymore, we create space. Space for something new to enter. A new thought, a new direction, a new strength we didn't know we had. It's kind of like when you stop paddling so hard in a river and realize the current's still carrying you forward. Life hasn't abandoned you. It's just waiting for you to stop resisting. I've learned that pain doesn't disappear just because we accept it, but it softens. It becomes something we can hold instead of something that crushes us. And over time, it transforms. It becomes insight, compassion, a kind of quiet wisdom that no book could ever teach. So if you're in that place right now, clenching, bracing, replaying, I just want you to know you can stop. You can breathe. You can whisper to yourself, yes, this hurts. Yes, I wish it were different, but I don't need to fight it anymore. And when you do, when you stop adding fuel to the fire, the flame starts to die down on its own. That's the power of acceptance. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's the first true act of reclaiming your life. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to begin. Even after I started to let go of the surface level resistance, something strange kept happening. I'd have these moments of clarity, real peace, like I was finally stepping out of the fog. I'd feel light, calm, even hopeful. And then boom, out of nowhere, something small would trigger me. A word, a memory, a look. And suddenly I was right back where I started, in the pit. Angry, hurt, spiraling. It was maddening. I thought, I already accepted this. I already did the work. Why am I still suffering? That question haunted me for weeks. I was doing everything I could to stay grounded, to be conscious, but it felt like there was something deeper, something hidden, pulling me back under every time I tried to rise. That's when I started learning about the unconscious mind. And honestly, it changed everything. You know how sometimes you walk into a room and just feel tense, even if nothing's being said out loud? Or how you keep ending up in the same kind of relationship, one that leaves you drained or heartbroken, even though you swore you'd never go through that again. That's not coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's programming. Stuff you never chose, but picked up along the way. Beliefs, fears, expectations, all stored in the background of your mind like invisible code running the show. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The first time I read that, I think I froze. It was like someone had put words to a feeling I'd carried for years. Because that's exactly how my life felt, like fate. Like I was doomed to repeat the same patterns, like I was cursed with the same pain in new packaging. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was just me? Or at least the parts of me I hadn't looked at yet? I started tracing the threads, looking at the situations that kept hurting me and asking myself, why does this feel familiar? What does this remind me of? And the answers were uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but they were always illuminating. Like realizing that I equated love with fear, because growing up, love was unstable. It came with tension, withdrawal, emotional distance. So as an adult, when someone made me feel safe and seen, I'd unconsciously sabotage it. Not because I didn't want it, but because my unconscious thought it was a threat. It didn't recognize stability as love. It only knew chaos, or noticing how I avoided success. Not because I didn't want to grow, but because somewhere deep inside, I believed that if I stood out, I'd be rejected. That belief wasn't mine. I never chose it. It was handed to me in little moments, moments that taught me not to shine too brightly, not to take up too much space. And the hardest part? Realizing how much of my suffering wasn't random. It was predictable. It was patterned. It was programmed. But once I saw that, really saw it, I started to get my power back. See, when pain keeps repeating, it's usually because your unconscious is trying to resolve something it never got closure on. It's looping through the same emotion, hoping you'll finally give it the presence it was once denied. That loop is the cry for integration. So I stopped asking, why is this happening to me again? And started asking, what is this trying to show me? It changed everything. Suddenly, the triggers became guides. The pain became a teacher. The same scenario I once hated showing up in my life became an opportunity to rewrite the story. Not by changing the outcome, but by changing how I showed up in it. And don't get me wrong, this is not a one-and-done process. It's messy. It's layered. Sometimes I still fall into the old programming, but I catch it sooner. I understand it better, and I don't shame myself for it anymore. Because now I know, healing isn't about never being triggered. It's about responding with awareness instead of reaction. It's about becoming the observer of your patterns, not the prisoner of them. And that's the beginning of real freedom. So if you've been doing the work and still find yourself stuck, please hear me when I say, it doesn't mean you've failed. It probably means you've reached the deeper layer, the part that lives below logic, below memory, the part that wants not to be fixed, but finally understood. You don't need to force your way through it. You just need to be willing to see it. And once you do, you're no longer at its mercy. You're the one holding the mirror now. And from that place, everything begins to change. Once I saw how my unconscious had been shaping my life, it was like waking up in a house I'd lived in for years and realizing half the rooms were hidden behind walls I never questioned. And suddenly, everything made more sense. Why I reacted so strongly to certain things, why I kept choosing people who couldn't really see me, why peace felt so unfamiliar that I almost rejected it when it came. But there was a moment, and I remember it vividly, when the initial clarity turned into something heavier. Not regret, exactly, but a sense of grief. Grief for how long I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. Grief for the choices I didn't even know I was making. I used to think I was a victim of circumstances. That life happened to me. That I was just trying to survive what was thrown my way. But the truth is, once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. And that means, whether you like it or not, you have to take ownership. That's the part nobody tells you about healing. It's not just about relief. It's also about reckoning. I had to admit that I'd been the one keeping certain wounds open, that I'd been feeding the same painful thoughts, nurturing the same beliefs that told me I was unlovable, unlucky, not enough. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but I was doing it. That was the hard part. And you know what? It's really tempting to avoid that truth. It's easier to stay angry at the world, to keep pointing fingers at the people who hurt you, the ones who didn't show up, the ones who left. Because as long as they're blame, you don't have to look inside. But that's a trap, because the moment you make your healing someone else's responsibility, you give away your power. You wait. You depend. You hope they change or apologize or finally understand. And in the meantime, you stay stuck. I stayed stuck for years. I was waiting for the past to be rewritten, waiting for some kind of justice or closure. But closure doesn't come from others. It comes from clarity. And clarity comes from turning inward and telling yourself the truth, even when it hurts. One of the most powerful questions I started asking myself was, what am I still choosing, even if I pretend I'm not? I asked it about relationships, about old narratives, about the ways I made myself small. And the answers weren't pretty, but they were real. Like realizing I stayed in certain dynamics because being rejected felt familiar. It was painful, yes, but predictable. And sometimes we choose the predictable pain over the uncertain peace. Or noticing how I played the role of the strong one so often. Not because I always felt strong, but because I didn't want anyone to see the parts of me that felt lost or needy. That role gave me purpose, but also kept me isolated. It's wild, the ways we betray ourselves without even realizing it. And it's even wilder how much healing can happen when we finally stop. When we stop pretending we're powerless. When we stop telling the story of our pain as if it's the whole story. When we stop identifying with the wounded parts of us and start speaking to them instead, gently, honestly, with presence. There's a shift that happens when you stop saying, "Why does this keep happening to me?" And start asking, what am I still carrying that draws this into my life? It's not about blame. It's about responsibility. Those are different things. Blame keeps you stuck in shame. Responsibility sets you free. It says, maybe I didn't choose what happened to me, but I get to choose what happens next. And from that place, from that raw, humbling place of self-honesty, I started to rebuild. Not with grand gestures or huge changes. Just little things, like noticing my inner dialogue, catching myself when I was repeating the old story, reminding myself that I have a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. Because awareness doesn't make the pain disappear overnight, but it does give you space. Space between the trigger and your reaction. Space between the emotion and the meaning you assign to it. And in that space is where change begins. So if you're waking up to your own patterns, if it's hitting you all at once like it did for me, I just want you to know it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to wish you had seen it all sooner. But don't stay in that regret too long. Because the fact that you are seeing it now means you're ready. You're ready to take the wheel, to stop driving on autopilot, to start making choices not from fear or pain, but from presence. And I promise you, that changes everything. I don't know about you, but somewhere along the way, I learned that emotions were dangerous. Not directly, of course. No one sat me down and said, "Hey, if you feel too much, you'll break." But it was in the small things, the way adults would change the subject when I cried, or the way people praised me for being so strong when I was clearly falling apart inside. The message was subtle, but clear. Being emotional makes people uncomfortable. It makes you vulnerable. So better to keep it all in. Smile. Be fine. Move on. And I got really good at that. I could keep going when everything inside me was screaming. I could laugh when I wanted to collapse. I could carry on like nothing was wrong. And most people never noticed. But what they didn't see was the storm building inside. See, the thing about suppressed emotions is that they don't go away. They wait. They fester. They turn into anxiety, numbness, exhaustion. And eventually, they find a way to surface, often in moments when you least expect it. A song, a smell, a random conversation. And suddenly you're crying in the grocery store, wondering what the hell is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just full. You've been holding too much for too long. I remember a moment, one that I'll never forget, when I finally let myself feel something I've been running from for years. I was sitting alone in my apartment. No music, no distractions. Just silence. And into that silence came this wave of grief I didn't even know I was carrying. It hit me like a tide. I didn't try to stop it. I didn't try to understand it. I just let it come. I wept. Not the kind of crying you can hide. The kind that feels ancient, like it's been waiting lifetimes to be felt. And when it was done, I didn't feel broken. I felt clean. That was the first time I truly understood what it means to heal. Healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about feeling what you were once too afraid to feel. It's about making space for the sadness, the rage, the terror. Not to dwell in it, but to honor it. To acknowledge that it's there for a reason. And here's what's wild. When you do that, when you sit with your feelings without trying to change them, fix them, or judge them, they start to soften. They stop screaming. Because what they really want is your presence. Not your solutions. Just you. I think about it like this. Emotions are like children. And when they're ignored, they act out. But when you kneel down, look them in the eyes, and say, I see you, I hear you, I'm here, something magical happens. They settle. They trust. They begin to heal. The hard part is that most of us were never taught how to do that. We were taught to analyze, to suppress, to distract. So now, as adults, we treat our emotions like threats. But they're not threats. They're messengers. And every time we run from them, we run from ourselves. So I started practicing something simple. When an emotion arises, I don't fight it. I don't drown in it either. I just pause. I breathe. I ask, what do you need from me right now? And I listen. Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes it's tears. Sometimes it's just sitting in silence with my hand on my heart, reminding myself I'm safe. And no, it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like breaking, but it's not. It's releasing. Because here's the truth. You can't selectively numb. If you shut down grief, you also shut down joy. If you block anger, you also block passion. Feeling is the price of being fully alive. And it's worth it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's real. And real is what saves us. So if you've been holding it all in, trying to be strong, trying not to feel too much, I get it. I really do. But maybe it's time to stop holding your breath. Maybe it's time to sit down with your heart and say, I'm ready now. Show me what I've been avoiding. And then just feel. Feel without fixing, without labeling, without rushing to get over it. Because when you do, something starts to shift. The pain that once felt endless begins to pass. Not because you forced it to, but because you finally allowed it to move. That's the paradox. The more we resist pain, the more it stays. But when we let it move through us, raw, messy, unfiltered, we stop being its prisoner. We become its witness. And in that witnessing, we begin to remember who we really are. Looking back, I think the most powerful shift happened the moment I stopped seeing pain as my enemy. It took me a long time to get there. For most of my life, I saw pain as something to avoid at all costs, a sign that something had gone wrong, a signal to escape, fix, numb, distract. But the more I ran, the more I hurt. And not just because of what had happened, but because I kept telling myself it shouldn't have. I kept waiting for life to stop hurting before I could start living. But life doesn't work like that. And at some point, I had to ask myself the question I'd been avoiding for years. What if the pain is here to help me? Not in some fluffy, toxic positivity kind of way. I'm not saying every trauma was meant to be, or that everything happens for a reason. I don't believe in that kind of spiritual bypassing. But I do believe this. Pain carries wisdom. And when we meet it with honesty and presence, it stops being just pain and starts becoming insight. I remember this one day. I was journaling, and I wrote something I didn't even realize I believed until the words were on the page. Maybe my pain is the doorway to becoming who I'm meant to be. It hit me like a lightning bolt, not because it erased the hurt, but because it reframed it. It made me realize that every time I had fallen apart, something deeper in me had woken up. That in the wreckage of everything I thought I needed, I'd always found something more true. Maybe not right away. Sometimes it took months, even years. But the growth was there. Quiet, relentless, real. There's a kind of gold that only suffering can forge. The kind Jung talked about when he described inner alchemy. He didn't mean turning lead into literal gold. He meant turning the heavy, dense material of our wounds, our shame, our fear, our loss, into light, into understanding, into power. And that's exactly what started happening. As I stopped running and started facing the hurt, I noticed it wasn't just pain I found. I found resilience. I found clarity. I found compassion for others I never could have understood before. Because once you've been in the fire, you can see the smoke in someone else's eyes. I started to look at people differently. Instead of judging them for their reactions or their messiness, I began to wonder what pain they were carrying. And that curiosity softened me. It made me slower to speak, quicker to listen, more human. And maybe that's the greatest gift pain gives us, the ability to see each other more clearly. But here's the thing, that transformation only happens if you're willing to go through the pain, not around it. You can't think your way out of it. You can't outrun it or mask it with affirmations and goals. You have to sit in the discomfort. You have to let it strip away everything that isn't real. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because once you're stripped bare, you start to realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable of choosing something new. You're no longer clinging to the version of yourself who needed everything to be perfect or pain-free or predictable. You're not performing for love or begging the past to change or waiting for someone to save you. You're just you, raw, present, awake. And in that space, you stop being afraid of the pain returning. Because now you know you can handle it. You've been through it before. You've walked through your own hell and found something sacred on the other side. That's what strength really is. Not the absence of suffering, but the presence of depth. The ability to stand in the storm and say, I know who I am now. So if you're in the middle of it, if everything feels like it's falling apart, I just want to tell you something no one told me. This could be your turning point. Not the end of you, but the rebirth. Not the breakdown, but the breakthrough. Because when the old pieces fall away, the illusions, the roles, the lies we told ourselves, what's left is the truth. And the truth is, you are not fragile. You are not broken. You are becoming. And pain is not the thing that destroyed you. It's the fire that revealed your strength. There's something sacred about realizing that the very thing you thought would break you didn't. That the wounds you carried for years, the stories you repeated until they defined you, they don't own you anymore. You faced them, felt them, walked with them, and now you're standing somewhere new. Not untouched, not invincible, but free. Because true freedom doesn't mean nothing can hurt you. It means you're no longer afraid of being hurt. It means you trust yourself to feel fully, to respond wisely, to keep going no matter what comes. I never thought I'd get here. Not really. I used to think that people who said they were at peace were lying, or worse, pretending. But now I understand. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the absence of inner war. It's what happens when you stop abandoning yourself. For so long, I lived according to what others thought, what others wanted, how others would respond. I wore masks to keep the peace, to avoid rejection, to stay safe. But the safety was a cage. Because the more I tried to be who others needed, the further I drifted from who I really was. And the further I drifted, the louder the pain got. Not just sadness, but that aching sense of misalignment, of living a life that looked okay on the outside, but felt hollow inside. But here's the thing no one tells you when you start this journey. Coming home to yourself is messy. You have to disappoint people, set boundaries, walk away from things you once begged for. You have to get comfortable being misunderstood. And that's hard, especially if your worth has always been tied to approval. But something beautiful happens when you finally stop seeking permission to exist as you are. You start to trust your own voice. You start to live in alignment. You start to feel a kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't prove, doesn't force. Just is. It's quiet. It's grounded. It's steady. And it's yours. You stop needing the world to validate you because you've validated yourself. You stop needing everyone to like you because you like you. You stop running from your story because you've made peace with every chapter, even the ones that hurt. And here's the best part. When you no longer carry the weight of unresolved pain, you begin to move differently in the world. Lighter, braver, softer too. You stop reacting to other people's projections because you know what's yours and what's not. Someone criticizes you, you don't crumble, you check in. Is this mine? If not, you let it go. You stop taking things personally because you see clearly most of what people do has nothing to do with you. You no longer chase love that hurts. You no longer seek validation from those who can't give it. You no longer pretend to be okay when you're not. Because now, you value truth more than performance, depth more than comfort, growth more than approval. And the cycle that once kept you stuck, pain, resistance, repetition, it begins to dissolve. Not because the world got easier, but because you got clearer. You understand now. Pain may visit, but it doesn't get to stay. It may knock, but you don't open the door the same way anymore. You greet it with awareness, with breath, with compassion, and you ask it what it came to teach you, not what it came to destroy. That shift changes everything. So if you're still in the thick of it, if you're still unraveling, still unlearning, still becoming, stay with it. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're becoming real. And that's the bravest thing a person can do. Because this world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more honest ones, more whole ones, more people who've walked through the fire and came out soft. Not because they didn't burn, but because they chose not to harden. And maybe, just maybe, that's who you are now. Not someone who's free from pain, but someone who's free within it. Someone who doesn't fear life's sharp edges, because you've met your own. Someone who doesn't flinch at the dark, because you've carried light through it. Someone who knows, deep in your bones, that suffering doesn't define you. Your response does. So here you are, not perfect, not untouched, but whole. And that's more than enough. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.